Chapter 10. Go, she commanded. Waiting a few moments, Ralph Moulton, for it was he who was hidden among the heavy folds of drapery, and had listened to every word that passed between Weimer and Dora, stepped softly out upon the balcony, and stood beside his fair hostess. She was weeping, and did not notice him until he laid his hand gently upon her smooth, bare arm, and said, in a sympathizing tone, "Why do you weep, Miss Dupont?" With a start of affright and a haughty gesture, she moved away from him, for his familiar touch angered her. Hastily wiping her eyes, she said, coldly, "Really, Mr. Moulton, I don't know as I can explain to you my feelings. Sadness, I presume, is one cause of my tears. And what could possibly render Miss Dupont sad? Methought her life was as fair and bright as earth's choicest gifts could make it," he said, with a voice which he tried to make tender. "If you please," she replied, "we will not discuss that subject now, Mr. Moulton." She turned abruptly to leave the balcony, for she deemed him rude to intrude himself upon her when she was struggling with her sad feelings. He quickly caught her hand, detaining her, while he exclaimed, "Stay, Miss Dupont, do not leave me so, for I have something to say to you." "I am listening," she replied coldly. "But pray, Mr. Moulton, be good enough to release my hand." He did not release it, but drew it within his arm, and then led her to one end of the balcony. "Miss Dupont, Dora, I love you, will you be my wife?" "No, sir," she answered, sharply. He started violently, then said, reproachfully, "I beg your pardon, did I understand you aright?" "I beg your pardon, Mr. Moulton, for allowing myself to speak in such a manner," she replied, wearily. Her heart had been almost broken with the scene that had just transpired, and she did not feel equal to another. "I have not been feeling very happy for a few moments past," she went on, "but I am pained at your declaration, for I cannot return your affection." "Miss Dupont, you must not say that," he returned, almost fiercely, "for my happiness, nay, my life depends upon your love." 67. I cannot listen to such words as these, Mr. Moulton, my answer is final. Please allow me to return to the drawing room. "Never," he replied, hotly, as he seized her in his arms with a convulsive clasp and rained kiss after kiss upon her white face. "Never until you yield to my love, my darling. My heart tells me that you are mine, mine by the right of my insatiable love, which nothing earthly can quell. No, no, my pretty one, lie still in these arms, which have ached to enfold thee for months, nay, for years, while my tongue has burned to pour forth the story of my adoration, but never before have I dared to approach you with these words. My own, you are about to be torn from me, and I cannot longer be silent. I cannot let you go, I would die to serve you, and do you think I will let the sea divide us? Never. I will follow you to the ends of the earth, and the land where you dwell shall be my home. Dora, Dora Dupont, you shall be my wife." He stopped, exhausted by his emotions, though he still held her pressed close to his fiercely throbbing heart. "Mr. Moulton, will you be good enough to unhand me? Or shall I be obliged to call for assistance?" Ice could not have been harder or colder than the clear, frozen tones which fell upon his ear. In an instant, his arms dropped from around her, and then they closed firmly across his breast, while he gazed upon her with eyes that almost burned her with their intense brightness. Scornfully erect, she stood for a moment, returning his gaze with one full of defiance. Her white robes trailed in graceful folds around her, her head was thrown haughtily back, while her nostrils quivered and dilated with the virtuous indignation that surged beneath her heaving bosom. Juno in her wrath could not have been more majestic and glorious. "Your insulting words and deportment, sir, merit but one answer," she sternly said. "Go, and never let me look upon your face again." "By heaven, I will not," he replied, stung to madness by her look and tone. "Is there no pity in your heart for love like mine? I will not believe you so cold and dead to all feeling as your words imply. If you expected love or sympathy even from me, Mr. Moulton, you have taken the wrong way to obtain them. I am not one to be forced. "Forgive me, my beautiful one, but I could not help it, and on my knees I beg your pardon," pleaded Ralph Moulton, with white face and imploring eyes upraised to hers. "'Tis useless, I do not and cannot love you." He was on his feet again in an instant, while the hot, angry blood mounted to his brow. "Is that answer final, Dora DuPont?" he asked, between his set teeth. "It is," she returned, coldly. "And now allow me, if you please, to return to my guests." She began to wonder within herself how she had ever tolerated this man's presence. He placed himself directly in her way while he said, "I warn you, Dora DuPont, to beware. I am not one to be trifled with. I give you one more opportunity to accept as true and pure a love as ever throbbed in the heart of man or woman. Will you accept it? Never. Enough. I swear, hear me, I swear you shall yet be my wife. Think not that I care for that foolish, childish ceremony, that can easily be set aside. Yes, you need not start and grow pale, I know your whole history. You little dreamed that it was the nephew of the man who bound you and your boy lover together, who bowed down and worshipped you. That marriage was illegal, I can prove it, and besides there were no witnesses. And then I have a sweet little secret for your ear that may cause you to change your mind, and accept my offer. I presume you think you are wedded to an honorable person, and the son of a wealthy man. But let me undeceive you. Robert Ellerton, Jr., has no right to his name. Come nearer and let me whisper, lest the winds should perchance gather the words and waft them to other ears. I am the rightful son of Robert Ellerton, while he is." The remainder of the sentence was barely breathed in her ear, but she heard it, for she grew white to her very lips, and shivered as if with the cold, but her voice never faltered as she replied, "Coward, do you think I will credit your base falsehood? You have no proof of your vile assertions." 69. Not quite so fast, my pretty one. I have the proofs here, come nearer to this light and I will explain. He took some papers from his pocket as he spoke, while she, drawn as if by fascination, came and stood beside him. Robert Ellerton, he explained, casting a triumphant look upon her, was secretly married to my mother long before your hero was born. I say secretly married, for he believed the ceremony to be only a farce, for he hired a man to marry them whom he thought had no legal authority. But he was mistaken, as these papers prove. My mother was Squire Moulton's cousin, though until within a few years I had been led to believe that she was his sister. When Ellerton wished to marry his other sweetheart, he coolly informed my mother that she was not legally his wife, and that he could no longer take care of her, and she, stunned to madness, fled from the country. After she had gone, my uncle, who hated Ellerton, discovered that the marriage was legal, and went to seek her and restore her to her rights, but she died at Naples, and Squire Moulton brought me to this country and educated me. I only discovered this a few years ago, and have been waiting until we both had finished our education, that my triumph might be more complete. I am the rightful son and heir of Robert Ellerton, and now it rests with you whether I assert my claims, and bring shame and disgrace upon one whom you profess to love so deeply, or whether I remain plain Ralph Moulton, with you for my loved and cherished wife. Examine these papers, and see if I have not proof of what I tell you." He held them up before her as he finished speaking. She read the marriage certificate, with Robert Ellerton and Rose Moulton's names attached, and her heart sank like lead in her bosom as she realized what suffering and shame it would bring upon her loved one if exposed to the world. She could easily have snatched the paper from him and torn it to fragments had she desired, but her pride would not allow her to let him see and gloat over the pain that racked her soul, and she answered, proudly, "I do not believe the story you have told me." "What? Not with this paper to prove it?" he asked, shaking the paper he held. "No. It were easy enough to forge it, to serve your base purposes. And were Robert Ellerton today a beggar in rags, and disgraced, as you would have me believe, I would gladly share his lot before I would wed with you, had you 1,000 fortunes. Now I command you go, and never pollute my sight with your vile presence again." She raised her graceful arm and pointed toward the drawing room. "You'll repent of this, my fair lady, and that right soon, too," he muttered, savagely. "Go." He took a step forward as if to obey the imperious command, then stopped and turned toward her again. "I warn you once again that I will hunt your lover to the death, and I swear that you shall yet be my wife." Her clear eyes flashed angrily, and her finger did not even quiver as it still pointed toward him. "Go." Clear and ringing as a trumpet call it sounded on the still night air, and a tiny foot stamped impatiently upon the floor of the balcony. Like the craven coward he was, his eyes drooped before her stern gaze, and he slunk cringingly from her sight. A deep, shuddering sob burst from Dora DuPont's pale lips as he disappeared. She clasped her hands upon her breast, as if to still the painful throbbings of her aching heart, while an expression of keenest agony swept over her beautiful face. "Heaven grant that it is nothing but a base calumny," she murmured as she paced to and fro. "But I fear it is all too true. Still, it may be, he only did it to frighten me into becoming his wife, coward that he is, to threaten a weak woman. But Robbie, come weal or come woe, I am yours, and only yours, until my heart shall cease to beat." A sweet smile dispersed the shade of anxiety that clouded her lovely face, as her thoughts flew over the seas to one whom she knew would yet claim her as his own. "Oh, heartless flirt that I am," she continued, after a moment, "2 offers in one night. The fates defend me against another." Saying which, she gracefully swept aside the heavy drapery, and appeared within the brilliantly lighted drawing room again. The following day a noble steamer sailed slowly down the 71 harbor, laden with its precious weight of human freight. Hundreds were gathered upon its wide, clean decks, gazing back upon the gradually receding spires and domes of the great city. Among these, but standing apart by themselves, was a gay and joyous party, who seemed to have cast all care and trouble to the winds, and who were happy only in the present, and in anticipations of the future. Madame Alroyd and Dora, attended by their servants, were of this party, and our lovely heroine was laughing and chatting merrily, as if no sorrow had ever clouded her fair brow or dimmed the luster of her clear blue eye. She could not be still. Her gaiety sparkled and bubbled forth in a continual stream of bright sayings and musical, silvery laughter, for was she not bound for the land that held her darling? And perhaps she might by some chance meet him there. It should be no fault of hers if she did not, and she knew their hearts would speak for themselves when that happy day should arrive, and she felt earth could hold no greater joy for her than to be again clasped to his loving, throbbing heart as in days of yore, and to feel that nothing earthly could ever again separate them. Many wondered at this bright, innocent beauty's excessive life and joy that day, and many envious glances were drawn toward the group that was such a host of pleasure in itself. On the opposite side of the deck stood a man wrapped in a large traveling cloak, and with a hat slouched and drawn down over a pair of piercing black eyes. At his side stood another clad in like manner, only his hair was white, and he had a disagreeable stoop in his shoulders. Both these men were engaged in a low, muttering conversation, while at the same time they cast baleful looks upon the party opposite, who little dreamed of the phantoms of evil lurking in their path, tracking their every footstep, and vowing eternal vengeance.